the distinct pleasure at this time of introducing a gentleman who is a friend of mine and of yours and well known to you. He has many, many distinctions. He is a graduate of Yale University, and I always say that proves that a man can rise above his origins. He has had a very distinguished legal career, both in private practice and in public service. He has served since 1981 as the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the Department of Justice. Would you please welcome at this time Mr. Brad Reynolds. Brad?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much. It is for me a most pleasant assignment that I have tonight, and also a singular privilege to introduce you to the speaker of this event. Dick Thornburgh is certainly not new to the Washington scene, nor is he a stranger to the Department of Justice. As an Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Criminal Division from 1975 through 1977, he built on a very strong and impressive record of 6 years of effective law enforcement as the United States Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania. There is no one whom I have spoken with who knew Dick and who worked with him during that period, and I have spoken with a large number of people. No one who has not been happy, I guess I should say ecstatic, in welcoming him back to Washington and to the department. And that's not at all hard to understand. Our new Attorney General is a man of good nature, of good humor, a good conservative, extraordinary legal talent, and an abundance of political savvy. His list of accomplishments, significant positions, national awards, and honorary degrees goes on and on and on and on. As governor of Pennsylvania, Dick Thornburgh quickly earned the reputation of a strong leader, true to his word, impeccably honest, and always cool under pressure. He understood, better than most, the critical importance to an orderly and ordered society of criminal law enforcement. As he has declared on more than one occasion, the first civil right of all Americans is the right to be free from fear in our homes, on our streets, and in our communities. It is from this perspective that Dick Thornburgh is a most fitting banquet speaker for this conference on the Constitution and federal criminal law. Under his leadership, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania carried out an unprecedented crackdown on crime. As governor, he won passage of new laws imposing tough mandatory jail sentences for violent and repeated offenders. He adopted tough new standards for commutations and reinstated use of the death penalty in Pennsylvania for the first time in 24 years. He undertook the largest prison expansion in the state's history, building over 3,000 new cells and opening the state's first new correctional institution in over 25 years. He expanded the Pennsylvania police force, creating special units to crack down on drug trafficking and organized crime. And he received national acclaim for attacking the drug program from both the supply and the demand sides, dramatically expanding programs to combat drug abuse in the schools, in the workplace, and in the communities. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to be a member of the Thornburgh Justice Team. Fresh from a year as director of the Institute of Politics at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government, Dick has already made his presence felt within the administration and on the Hill as the head of the National Drug Policy Board. He works hard, he's a quick study, and he commands respect wherever and whenever he speaks. And therefore, without further ado, I want to turn this podium over to our banquet speaker for this evening, Dick Thornburgh, the 76th Attorney General of the United States.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, all of you. Thank you very much, Brad Reynolds, for a most generous introduction. I got to tell you, it beats the one I got last week in Philadelphia when I was at an event and the MC sprang to the microphone and announced to a waiting audience, "I know you all want to hear the latest dope from Washington, so here's the Attorney General." I feel tonight kind of the junior member of a triad of a group that sometimes bids fair to take over the world, graduates of a certain institution in New Haven. Stan Evans was known as a moderate observer for the Yale Daily News when I was there. Brad Reynolds distinguished himself, and I just got here from Harvard. I constituted a kind of a one-man affirmative action program in the Harvard Yard during my tenure there, being not only a conservative Republican, but a Yale graduate. And I think this was a sign of incipient toleration on that campus. When I came to Cambridge, I didn't know CLS from a BLT, but I sure learned the difference during the time that I was there. I also have to note, as I observed my good friend and longtime colleague, Bill Sessions, our superb FBI director, that he and I last night were recounting the fact that we belong to another conspiratorial group, and that is former U.S. attorneys. Bill and I served as U.S. attorneys together back in the 70s, and Bill Webster, the head of the CIA, is U.S. attorney, and we figure we got a pretty good lock on the intelligence and law enforcement community, and if you don't know it, you're better off for it. If you, I'm extremely glad to have this opportunity to meet with the Federalist Society. This is my first meeting with you. It's also one of my first major public appearances as Attorney General. This group wasn't around the last time I was in Washington. And I must say, in Pennsylvania, it hasn't yet picked up a full head of steam. But no doubt it will, because you are, after all, a young organization that is already making an impact on law school campuses across the nation, and now among Washington lawyers as well. Now that I'm here, I'm glad to make your acquaintance. For your National Lawyers Convention this year, you have chosen the topic, the Constitution and federal criminal law. I've got to tell you, my friends, if you had planned this convention expressly to welcome me to Washington, you couldn't have planned it any better. As law enforcement has occupied a major portion of my career. I know today you've had a full day of heavy-hitting academic contributions to the debate on crime and constitutional issues. And you have a similar day ahead of you tomorrow. Although I have been at Harvard during the last year, I don't plan to subject you to an academic address, which should occasion a full round of applause. I would instead like to talk to you about three things. Federalism in the 1980s and something about what we did in Pennsylvania in that environment, about law enforcement within the structure of our constitutional system, and say a few words in closing about my number one priority as Attorney General, the problem of narcotics and dangerous drugs. One of the reasons that I have been proudly affiliated with the Republican Party throughout my political career is that our party believes in strong state and local government. We don't happen to believe that all the answers lie in Washington, D.C. I'm proud of my past and my present service at the federal level, but I do not and never have believed that all problems have federal solutions. I admire tremendously the wisdom of the members of the Constitutional Convention who met predictably in Pennsylvania to try to pull a workable government out of the chaos of the Articles of Confederation. Two basic systems were in contention: the national, in which there would be one central government, and the federal, in which the United States would remain a loose fraternity of independent mini-nations. Let the cynics say, if they will, that the result was due more to accident and compromise than to wisdom. Be that as it may, it was a stroke of genius. The framers came up with a system in which the states would remain sovereign, but would delegate to the national government such powers as were necessary to preserve the internal peace and to deal with the outside world as one nation. It was an unprecedented hybrid of the national and federal principles, so novel that we cannot blame those who thought it would be unworkable. Indeed, at times it has seemed it might fail, especially in the tragic armed conflict that culminated at Gettysburg, once again in Pennsylvania. But on the whole, it has worked and is working even better today, as states and localities reassert their role as laboratories of democracy. At those levels of government, legislatures and town councils can try solutions that might or might not work at the national level. Fundamental changes in this decade have contributed to the rebirth of the vitality of that system. These 1980s have seen a marked reversal of the 50-year trend toward more centralized government. The era of bigger and more intrusive federal bureaucracies that began in the 1930s, and the more recent tendency of federal judges to become super governors and super mayors in cases where they sought to impose their own views and their own philosophy upon state and local governments, is rapidly coming to an end. During this decade, the pendulum has begun to swing back toward the concept of limited government at levels closest to the people, the concept which the Founding Fathers embodied in our Constitution in 1787. A federal system, not just a federal government. And this hasn't occurred by chance. For in 1981, there came to office an administration committed to reducing the role of the federal government and enhancing the power of the states. President Reagan, a former governor himself, committed his administration to a new federalism agenda, and more important, undertook the specific steps necessary to move in that direction. These steps, predictably, struck a responsive chord with an American citizenry that had seen its ability to control its own destiny drift gradually but at an accelerating pace to the puzzle palaces of this capital city. We all longed for a greater sense of responsiveness and accountability than was forthcoming from a bureaucracy addicted to simply stamping out one federal program after another with a cookie cutter. It had become apparent that one size fits all is no way to treat the special and particular needs of widely diverse communities that make up this unique republic. And states and local governments have responded in community after community as we speak. Imaginative new programs dealing with economic development, community conservation, education, law enforcement, the environment, and many others are being fashioned by a new generation of forward-looking leaders. Their badge is no longer the outstretched hand toward Washington, D.C., but is instead the shoulder to the wheel in an effort to find local solutions to local problems and at a lower cost to the taxpayer in most cases. Today's challenge is to continue this movement. The swing of the pendulum in this positive and constructive direction must not be reversed. Your help in enhancing our return to true federalism is needed desperately, and I invite your study and your continued active support for it. As you've heard, I came to the governorship of Pennsylvania following service as a United States Attorney and in the Department of Justice here in Washington. While becoming governor clearly meant an expanded range of priorities for me, nonetheless, fighting crime remained high on the list. In fact, we achieved a 17% reduction in serious crime over the 8-year period that coincided with my two terms as governor. This is the commercial. Pennsylvania's serious crime rate, as measured by the Department of Justice, is the lowest today of any of the large states, a fact of which I am particularly proud. But pursuing an aggressive campaign against crime was not just the prosecutor in me asserting itself in the governor's office. It was an integral part of our campaign to make Pennsylvania once again an attractive place to live and work. During those 2 terms, we turned Pennsylvania around from a high tax, high unemployment, high crime Rust Belt state into a state that today combines the best of advanced technology and traditional industry. Thanks from the Pennsylvania delegation. I'm glad to know you're here, folks. Our state went from having one of the 10 highest unemployment rates in the nation when I was elected to one of the 10 lowest when I left office. Thanks in no small part, of course, to the American miracle of overall economic recovery under the Reagan administration policy. But fighting crime is more than just creating a better quality of life to help attract more investors and employers. While that's important, it represents indeed a commitment to defending what Brad Reynolds told you I've always considered to be the first civil right of every citizen, and it bears repeating. The first civil right of every American is the right to be free from fear in our homes, on our streets, and in our communities. And that ideal, which has been a dominant force in my career, will continue to be my lodestar as Attorney General of the United States. For that reason, I'd like to reflect for just a moment on the title topic of your conference, the Constitution and federal criminal law. The lion's share of criminal law enforcement remains at the state and local level, today as always. And this Attorney General certainly has no intention of tampering with that, and for very good reasons. One is that the genius of the common law, with its combination of stability and adaptability, continues to hold sway in greater degree at the state level, not at the federal level, as we all learned in the first year of law school. Notwithstanding the efforts of the clever codifiers trying to improve on the accumulated wisdoms of centuries of Anglo-American jurisprudence, the common law remains as the common citizen's protection against the criminals he or she fears the most. Another reason most criminal law is state law is the spirit of experimentation to which I earlier alluded, a spirit which allows state legislators and governors to try law enforcement measures that might not be feasible or suitable at the federal level, or not feasible or suitable at all. Yet, notwithstanding the preeminent role of the states and localities, there are aspects of criminal law that are fundamentally federal. An increasing number of crimes today cross state lines and national boundaries as well. The one I want to dwell on for a moment before closing is drugs. Drug trafficking and drug abuse link all levels of law enforcement in a single chain. The user and the street dealer who sells to the user both violate federal, state, and many local laws. The big trafficker who sells to the street dealer violates federal law. And that big trafficker and his contacts in producing and transshipping countries all violate the laws of the United States and of those other countries as well. Every level of law enforcement is involved, from international cooperation forces such as the 30-nation International Drug Enforcement Conference, which last week announced the results of its first major effort in Central and South America, right down to the police officer on the beat. They're all involved. My own state has recently been as ravaged as any by the scourge of drugs. Listen to this. In the past few months in Philadelphia, there has been one small child killed and another paralyzed from the waist down in a crossfire between drug dealers. 2 other children were killed execution style by Jamaican drug dealers, supposedly for stealing some crack. Their ages were 13 and 14. Putting an end to this kind of destructive insanity will be one of my top priorities as Attorney General of this nation. As chairman of the President's Drug Policy Board, I intend to enhance as best we can the enforcement of federal drug laws, to set and meet new goals in international cooperation against drugs, and to improve still further the caliber of federal, state, and local cooperation. At a more basic level, I would suggest to you that when a society tolerates, permits, and forbids certain things, it says a lot about its fundamental character and values. And this, in turn, reflects on all of us as members of that society. And if we move drugs into the column of permissible things, even if we do so out of the motive of efficient resource allocation, we will have thrown in the towel on what I would consider one of the crucial moral battles of this time, one on which I happen to believe, fortunately, there is a consensus among the American people today. And role models in the athletic, entertainment, and political worlds in particular, who adhere to a contrary lifestyle, had better be reminded of their lonely status in our society. Our level of tolerance for the drug abuser must diminish if we are to truly mount a war on drugs. Furthermore, since the topic of this conference is crime and the Constitution, let me add this. I know that a learned debate will take place here tomorrow on the constitutionality of the death penalty. And as you might guess, I'd like to put my 2 cents worth in. My copy of the Constitution doesn't say anything about the death penalty being unconstitutional, and I don't think yours does either. I do happen to believe that the death penalty does serve a deterrent capability within a narrow, constitutionally defined class of cases, and is, incidentally, an appropriate punishment for certain drug-related homicides. Simple logic compels the conclusion that those bent upon willful, premeditated, cold-blooded murder, for example, will pause in their pursuit if they realize that carrying it to fruition may cause them to forfeit their own lives. Those who lament the paucity of evidence to the contrary seem to hold to an illusory view that out of nowhere will somehow materialize a cohort of criminals testifying that they would not have committed a homicide if a death penalty had been on the books. As a former prosecutor, my friends, I can only say nonsense. But you will hear more on this question tomorrow. I'm pleased to note, by the way, that we had some good news yesterday regarding the anti-drug bill now being debated on the Hill. By a vote of 299 to 111, the House approved an amendment by my former congressman, Pennsylvania Representative George Gekas, to provide for a federal death penalty for persons who commit murder in the course of a drug-related felony. Now, the Washington Post story on this development was instructive, I might suggest. It began as follows, and I quote, "The House, in what some opponents characterize as an ill-considered election year rush to take a tough stand against drug trafficking," and then went on, you know, how convenient to be told the Liberal Party line before we're even told what happened. But there was more good news, and I mean good news. The House also adopted by a vote of 259 to 134 an amendment by Congressman Dan Lundgren of California to enact into statute the good faith exception to the exclusionary rule in drug cases. This, I can tell you, from personal experience, will greatly reduce the number of otherwise solid drug prosecutions that are lost or that never come to trial because of minor procedural flaws in a search warrant. Both of these amendments, if they make it into the final bill, and we'll be working to achieve that, will prove to be very effective weapons for our society in its continuing battle against drug traffickers. I want to thank the organizers of this conference for inviting me here this evening and to have a chance to share views with such an eminent group and to speak to such an eminent audience. And I want to thank you for your attention to my remarks at the end of a long day. As I said at the beginning, this is a first for me. And as Bogey so eloquently put it, this may be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Thank you very much.